Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Gabe Hollenby. This is the first time you're seeing me on cam tonight, so thank you for joining us. I'm a tech evangelist here at AWS, and we're coming to you live from Summit here in Sydney. And this session is going to be all about one of our coolest services, in my opinion, called the DeepRacer. See this thing here? It's called a DeepRacer. We'll get to that in a minute, but first I just want you to know who else is on cam. So I'm Gabe, and this is...
Hey, I'm Sunil here.
I'm Nikki, you know me. You see me on Twitch all the time, and I'm just like drooling at this right now.
And I'm Kurosh. I'm a solution architect based in Sydney.
So Kurosh, you're a solution architect. Sunil, what do you do at AWS?
So I work with the AWS DeepRacer team, and I'm the lead scientist on this project.
Okay, so before we talk about DeepRacer specifically, let's frame it in the larger context of where it fits into the other services at AWS. So we have a number of services in the AI and machine learning space at AWS. Those application level services like Poly and Lex and Transcribe that you saw earlier today on stream. Middle layer stuff like SageMaker, and bottom layer stuff like AMIs for deep learning that are optimized for deep learning. But we also have some hardware platform stuff, and that's where DeepRacer fits in, right?
So it's both the hardware and educational. So to democratize artificial intelligence or machine learning, it's really important that you provide, we provide the compute, the storage, all that. But it's also important to actually have education and democratize that so that people can learn and use that in their businesses.
And so how does this fit into that? What is the goal of DeepRacer? Why did we make it?
So to help people like me learn machine learning?
Absolutely. So our goal was literally in this case, put machine learning and reinforcement learning in the hands of people.
Okay. And so reinforcement learning, what is that? Frame that in the context of machine learning at large for our viewers, please.
So typically, you might have heard of supervised learning and unsupervised learning. With supervised learning, you have labels for every data point that you have. So for example, an image of a cat, a dog, where you have the label of specific animal.
Yep.
So in case of reinforcement learning, you actually have a signal in terms of how it should perform. So it's very close to how a human learns. So in cases where, let's say you're teaching a baby to do a certain thing, or a pet to do a little trick, you incentivize them on good behavior.
You get the treat when I say sit, please.
Exactly.
It's like a Roomba, right? A Roomba learns by reinforcement learning, like when it hits the wall and then it doesn't hit that wall again.
So yeah, there are a few technologies that people could use in terms of navigation. It's a good point. We actually chose reinforcement learning as the way to actually drive the car. And one of the big reasons behind that was we believe reinforcement learning is a new paradigm for technology that's going to bring in a huge change and solve problems that have been not solvable so far. Which is why we thought we built SageMaker RL. That was one part of simplifying the whole pipeline to build reinforcement learning models. But on the other hand, we needed education, and hence we built DeepRacer.
So speaking of problems and hard problems to solve, in the near term and in the long term, how do you think reinforcement learning will help us?
Yeah, so people are using RL in really interesting cases. So a lot of industrial automation are being driven by reinforcement learning. Another example is HVAC systems, energy management in huge buildings. So you've gotten really good benefits because it frames the problem. It's really good at solving optimization problems. Data center power management, auto scaling of infrastructure. So the use cases are many, and not to discount the autonomous driving angle of RL as well.
Please tell me you're going to pop the hood of this thing and show us what's underneath. I'm like dying.
So let's get into the hardware details in a second, but first maybe we have a couple of slides here, or screenshots to illustrate a few things. So do you want to go here and talk about how the DeepRacer architecture is and the to for the car?
Yeah, let's actually pop the slides on.
So if we switch over to the content that I've got up here. That's not the right screen. Let me switch to mirroring. Maybe we can pull that up again. There we go. That's better. Okay. So DeepRacer car specifications. What are we looking at in the DeepRacer?
Yes. So the car has a 4-megapixel camera, and it's actually has Intel Atom board along with a 100 gigaflops GPU.
That sounds like a lot.
Yeah, so actually, it's right now, the models that we have are pretty lightweight, and in fact, our inference speeds, because of the GPU, is at 14 milliseconds per image. So you can imagine that's pretty fast. So that is being powered by the Intel Atom processor. And then we have a compute battery, which is not shown here. And then
normally
So
a
it's
battery,
on
you
top.
mean. Right, okay.
Correct. And the battery lasts for about like 6 hours, so it's pretty good. And this runs Ubuntu operating system, and you as a developer have root access. So you've got, it's a mobile desktop.
Okay. And so that's the car specifications. Let's also quickly talk about how does this thing learn, right?
Right. So as I was talking about how reinforcement learning learns, so two main components to it. One is the agent, the second is the environment.
Okay.
In our example, the car is the agent. So agent walks through the environment or explores the environment by taking actions, right? I mean, I guess we've all played video games, right? Like car video games. You have the simplest would be, left, right, and straight.
Like Pac-Man, right? Go left, go right, go up, go down.
Yeah, so with the arrows. So you do the same here is the car has a fixed set of actions that it can take. And through that, it explores the environment, and the environment gives the signal if it's doing good or bad. So the signal comes from a concept we call as reward function. A reward function you specify. The simplest reward function is, if you stay on the track, I'll give you +1. If you don't stay on the track, a 0.
Right. And then maybe we also want to augment that by, I don't just want you to stay on the track, because then it could just not move. So it's like distance from your origin point.
So how complicated can we get with the reward function?
We've actually exposed a lot of the components. If you go to the next slide.
Sure.
So as an example, you get where the car is, the XY location, what is the steering angle and the throttle of the car, and what is the direction where it's pointing at. And we actually give you what we call as waypoints, which are sort of GPS tracker points. So you know exactly where you are on a given track. So then you can come up with really interesting strategies that,
for example, sharp turns versus really broad turns.
So
absolutely.
This is probably a good moment to say explicitly, because I'm not sure if we have yet. There's the real world component of this, which is this physical DeepRacer car that we've seen. And then there's a virtual world component that we're using to conduct the reinforcement learning.
Which you don't need the car for.
Right, so you could do reinforcement learning with like a robotic arm and a camera that's just figuring out how to tell it how to move. But in the case of more complicated things like a remote control car or something, or a self-driving car in the real world, like a car that we get in, you don't want to have cars driving around on their own and crashing into things, because that
Let's bubble level the tripod. Little. So it is bubble level. Let's move the camera on axis a little more, like this, like square. So move the camera over. And then now bubble on. There we go. Still tilt it a little bit. How's that look?
SageMaker RL that does the reinforcement learning training. The RoboMaker piece sends in the images and the data and the rewards that it has got for the actions it's taken, and the SageMaker part builds the model. We have other components which add a little fun. So you want to see what the simulation does. So we use Kinesis video streams.
It would be nice to look at it.
Yes.
But it's not a necessity.
So a couple questions from chat that I saw. One was, does it really need 32 gigs of storage, and why does it have that much storage? And then the other one was, what is the current world record lap time for the DeepRacer?
Right.
credits for the first correct response. And maybe that was too chat, but I don't know if you know the world record.
I do.
He does.
All right, so back on. So we've the world record is currently at 7.998 seconds.
Wow.
which
Let's
is set-
contextualize that. So how big is the track, and how many seconds is it or driving for to win?
So the track is approximately 18 meters all round.
Okay.
So the fastest speed, so the average speed, it was around 2.7 meters per second.
I'm going to fast forward through
That-
some of the slides
that
just so we can
is
show. This is
fast.
what the track looks like. Is that right? Okay.
The first thing, the storage component is, well, that's what we loaded. It doesn't necessarily need, but it's helpful if you want to store some videos as you are.
Can you also store the data from like as it's learning, like if it?
Absolutely. So there are scripts available to actually store the images as you run on the physical track. I know you had a question about what are some of the interesting strategies. So I want to show
Yeah,
these
that's
are
definitely what we want to know.
three
Yes.
different reward heat maps. So this is
Okay.
how you were sort of telling the car where you should actually be on the track. So the most colored, so the yellow is where it is incentivized the most, and the red is sort of lower. So wherever you see like really yellow, that's where it's getting the most rewards.
Got it.
Pyatt wants to know, is the model learning during the race also?
No. So the model only trains in the simulation. Currently, it does not learn once you put it on the physical device.
Cool. So yeah, you want to tell a bit more
in
about
this
these
case,
reward functions?
On the first one, you see the outer lane. You can see as long as you're staying in the track, I'll give you some rewards.
Right.
But the second thing is, the middle one is you're incentivizing to take the faster turns, because you can enter the turn slow and then make it really fast, because you want to
Accelerate
swerve in.
through the turn.
Exactly. So that's when you make all the good lap times.
Yep.
So if we can go to the next slide, we have a video of the cars going really fast.
Let me just try and play this. There we
Yeah.
go. Hopefully you guys are seeing this on stream.
So you can see like
Wow, this is fast.
Wow.
That
it's so
looks
cool.
pretty fast actually
Wow.
this is driving itself.
yes.
Wow,
That
you
is
can see
really
how
fast.
smooth
fantastic.
the car is, and you saw the turn,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
It was really
Fantastic.
fast.
So it's still doing a little bit of swerving, which is interesting because ideally it wouldn't have to do that. We've got 1 minute left, so I want to wrap up. Any last minute pressing questions from the chat that we want to ask Nikki?
I'm not seeing anything coming up, but guys, now's your time to ask your questions.
Can I go?
Yeah,
So-
you can go.
So, where do people can get started?
Exactly.
So
Last question.
we launched the DeepRacer League today. So just a few hours
Well
ago,
done.
it is launched. So you can now log in, train your model, and submit to the virtual league. In fact,
What's the URL for that? Do you know?
So again, you do not need an
AWS
actual vehicle to participate in what he's saying.
Yeah. So aws.amazon.com/DeepRacer.
What is the
And
cost of entry for the virtual only?
So so you're
We have a
charged
free track.
as long as you train the model. So it's an hourly or minute by minute cost or
And
second by
I
second
think
billing.
we have a free tier on that as well, right?
Yes, we do.
Cool. So anybody can get started training a virtual DeepRacer with the virtual league. AWS to Amazon.com/DeepRacer. That's where you can go to learn more if what we've said is interesting and exciting to you. And that's all the time we have for this segment. So thanks very much for tuning in. Thank you
Thanks,
to
everybody.
Sunil and Karash for joining us. And
All right.
thank you,
Thank
Nikki.
you.
Thank you so much. We'll be back with more content.
Yep, thanks.